And for more on the midday, I'm joined by Country Director, Action Aid Nigeria, Andrew Mamedu. Is live in our Abuja studio. Happy Workers' Day to you. Let's begin with your assessment of this administration's policy direction in the area of workers, particularly when it comes to protecting workers' rights.
Yeah, thank you very much. Happy Workers' Day to all Nigerian workers. It is, of course, an opportunity for us to serve our country. I am a worker, and for all the workforce across the country and even globally. Coming to Nigeria, May Day, we started celebrating May Day in Nigeria since 1981, even though globally it started in US in 1886. So over the years, we've seen workers more united, unionizing, demanding for better working condition, welfare of the workforce. And over the years, government has been recognizing them, of course, and responding to some of the issues and demand that comes from the labor force. Of course, most times when you hear the Nigeria Labour Congress or the Trade Union Congress, the first thing that comes to your mind is the issues of protest or strike actions and all of that. But clearly, it is a union that fights for the welfare and the interests of workers. Now, coming back to the country, for us as a country in Nigeria, how have we been responding to the welfare and needs of the country? So I'll start with the positives. So the good thing is we recognize as a country that the current minimum wage, for instance, is not a living wage. So the current government has set up a team that is reviewing that whole process and trying to come up with a minimum wage. That's the first thing. And I think immediately this current government took over, they also set aside a cushion, I think about 30,000 naira minimum for minimum wage for some categories of workers. So those are responses that the government has put in place at the federal level. But remember that we operate a federal system of government, which has the federal, state, and local government level. So for the federal, of course, federal government is dealing with that. I know a few days ago, some of the workers were raising the issue of that in the last 2 months they've not been paid. I don't know if in the last few days the last 2 months has been paid. So those are responses that we have gotten. But we have the state government, and we also have the private sector, the organized private sector, which is in this conversation. There has not been a unified and organized response to see that the private sector, a good number of the private sector, comes on board and deals with this issue of minimum wage. So the monitoring and the enforcement of the minimum wage, even what we have, is not strong enough. So going where we intend to go to now, trying to get the workers to have a living wage from 30,000. I think there have been conversations. Of course, we've gotten the first move in the country. Edo State has taken the first move, and we of instituting 70,000 as a minimum wage, which will take effect from today, which is a good thing. But of course, the question is 17,000 actually considered a living wage in Nigeria, given the condition of things we have today?
Because if you also pay attention to conversations at Eagle Square today, it's about ensuring that workers get a living wage, as against a minimum wage. There's an ongoing tripartite committee looking into that. But do you think that we'll be able to come to some sort of agreement, particularly between government and labor, as to what is that living wage? And how important is the figure? Because it doesn't matter how much you're paying a worker. What matters is that money able to take them home and meet their basic needs?
Yeah, okay, so I think it's very critical. We live in a society in Nigeria where the welfare of workers is also paramount. So cost of things, cost of living has been escalating, and the cost of living does not recognize that workers do not have enough salaries or resources to be able to match that. A bag of rice, the price of the bag of rice going to almost 70,000 or plus. The cost of fuel was increased by 300%. Electricity tariff for A-band was increased. The exchange rate, imported inflation. So all of those affect the cost of living. Of course, if you look at inflation, food inflation getting over 40% first time. So an average worker still goes to the market. So the question is, if they go to the market, if they have to come to work, if they have to come to offices, go to their offices, they will need to pay transport. So how much is it? If you say the minimum wage is 70,000, what is the basic of that component? What is the amount for feeding? What is the amount for school fees for the children? So a worker that earns 70,000, what would that worker be able to do with it? And of course, we have to match it side by side with the resources we have in our country. I'm not making an excuse for government, but we have to be able to pay it. And whatever we agree, of course, we have to enforce it at the state and even within the private sector. But if we are going to match it, then it has to be, if we are saying sacrifice, sacrifice has to come across board from both the government, from both the politician, the political class. So we don't have a separate living wage for both the working class, the civil servant, and the politicians. So there has to be some form of alignment, some form of match between both to make sure that the working class are also able to compete favorably or live favorably within the society. So how much would that be? Of course, Labour is asking for 600 plus naira for minimum wage. Of course, Edo State has made their first move, 70,000. And of course, government is going to, in any moment from now, government is going to also announce theirs. I know there have been some review here and there in the last couple of days for some parastatals and some agencies and all that, which was between 25 and 35%. But of course, Labour is saying that is not a living wage. If you ask, what is a living wage? A living wage simply means what would make a worker go home and be able to take basic care. There are definitions of basic care: food, shelter, healthcare, education. So those are the basic care, and we have to calculate it, look at the figures, and be able to respond to those issues. That is what the government should be able to put on the table. Of course, as usual, it's, the NLC and TUC have given an ultimatum for this to be resolved between now and end of the month, end of May. And of course, they've also given an ultimatum for reversal of the electricity, but that's not what we're looking at right now. But it's for the minimum wage. How do we make sure that the minimum wage is able to take the workers home at the end of the day? Poverty sits at the bottom of this. So if we're looking at what is the definition of poverty, so if you're looking at $1.80, which is the global minimum definition of poverty, how much is a day? So how much is $1.80 a day times 30 days or times 22 work? No, times 30 days, 31 days. If you calculate that, that gives you an idea of what the minimum wage is compared to, of course, converting it from.
There are other very major factors apart from the minimum wage itself. You know, the inflation is a very relevant factor in this regard, and you know, ensuring that we also have a buoyant economy that will favor all the stakeholders. Andrew Mamadou is the Country Director, Action Aid Nigeria. Thank you so much for talking to us on the news this hour.
Thank you for having me.